Hey, before you read about it on Facebook or Twitter, or hear about it from your friends, find out what today's big stories really mean with me, Sean Hannity, today at 2, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Where have all the civil libertarians of the left gone? A question that Alan Dershowitz has been asking throughout this entire Mueller-Russian collusion saga, and perhaps most pointedly in the wake of the disclosure of the FBI informant, you say informant, I say spy, that was unearthed and disclosed effectively by the Washington Post, New York Times over the weekend. We know his name now, Stefan Halper. Alan Dershowitz squaring off against Jeffrey Toobin on CNN yesterday saying this.
To the ACLU, when undercover agents were put into the anti-war movement, into civil rights movement, all they were there was to listen, into Muslim churches. Civil libertarians are generally a little bit suspicious when undercover agents go just to ask questions, and I think we as civil libertarians ought to be suspicious of this. Allay our suspicions, and then we'll be fine.
Yeah, but there are no suspicious minds, pardon my Bruce Springsteen, no suspicious minds here with respect to embedding agents of the state to monitor Trump and Trump campaign operatives, to engage with them in the context of a presidential campaign. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Ronald Kessler, who is a New York Times bestselling author of books on the Secret Service, the FBI, and the CIA. Also his latest, Inside the Trump White House. Ron, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Sure. Good to be with you.
So what about the spin from Jim Clapper and Adam Schiff and Chuck Schumer that, first of all, this is outrageous to insinuate that anything nefarious was going on, that the machinery of the state was being used for political purposes, and if anything, that FBI asset was being used to protect Trump from advances by the Russians to interfere with the 2016 election?
Well, on this one, I have to say I agree with that side. On the one hand, there certainly have been big problems. We saw that with Comey. We saw it with Andrew McCabe. It's incredible what Comey has said since his book came out, that it's possible that Trump was compromised by the Russians. What a crazy thing to say. And then when he was asked by Jake Tapper, why does he say that? He said, well, he keeps protesting that he's innocent. We can imagine if a juror in a murder trial said, I voted to convict because he kept saying he's innocent. And he also said that Trump has not criticized Putin. First of all, that's not true. But secondly, he's taken about 12 different actions against Russia, totally undercutting what Comey said. But on the other matter, this is just standard procedure in any investigation where, let's say in a murder investigation, you don't have quite enough evidence on an individual, you're suspicious, you enlist someone who knows him, like a friend, to try to develop more information. If this were Hillary's campaign, I think the right would be very happy to make sure that she is not being co-opted by the Russians. Now, there's obviously no indication of collusion, but it's up to the FBI when there's a belief that Russia is trying to have an impact on our elections to find out, number one, what they're doing, and number two, if any Americans are involved in that illegal activity. And in the case of the Trump campaign, there were these two aides, Papadopoulos and Carter Page, who were in constant contact with the Russians and carrying out some of their instructions. It was up to the FBI to find out what that was up to. Now, that's not spying. That's not infiltrating the campaign. It's simply to find out if criminal charges are warranted in the case of those two individuals.
So you're of the mindset that this person was helping to protect President Trump and his campaign?
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. I would say the FBI had to find out what was going on. What was there actual collusion? Was there an actual problem, or not? That's all.
Well,
it's up to the FBI to get the facts, not to come to a conclusion before they start investigating.
How about
it's fine to investigate what happened. We're going to find out. I think in the end, there's going to be very little that comes out of this investigation.
how about deploying an asset before they've officially started the investigation? According to them, this is Byron York's reporting, noting from the Washington Post story over the weekend. The professor, talking about Halper, the professor's interactions with Trump advisors began a few weeks before the opening of the investigation, when Page met the professor
there's so
at the
much
symposium.
misinformation. Every pundit has a different version of what happened, and they use these terms, mole, etc. No, of course that's not true. There's no way that the FBI could legally open or enlist someone unless they'd already gone through various hoops to show internally that there's reason to investigate.
Okay, but that's a Washington that's a Washington Post reporting of Stefan Page over the weekend. That's in their reporting of it. That's not a So I'm just saying it's a question for the FBI to square, isn't it?
Sure. It's fine to go into what the FBI did, given all this controversy, and that's great. I just don't see that there's going to be any abuse found, beyond what we already saw with the people at the top of the FBI.
Michael Caputo, who was an advisor to Trump's campaign as well, told Laura Ingraham last night on her show that this is not the only informant asset that came at the campaign. I know because they came at me, and I'm looking for clearance from my attorney to reveal to the public. This is just the beginning. The FBI is not the only Obama agency who came into the campaign, says Michael Caputo. But you're sure that there's nothing nefarious afoot?
Yeah, no, I'm sure they tried him as well, and the result was they found nothing, and that's what they should have done. They found nothing. They found no collusion, no involvement by the campaign as a whole, or certainly Trump. And I think Mueller's going to close that investigation very soon. That's why he wants to interview Trump. Obviously, that's what you would do when you're near the end of an investigation. In my book, The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game, interviewed Trump, and it's the only interview he says he has given or will give for a book as president. And he asked me what I thought of Mueller, because he knows I've written 3 books on the FBI. I've interviewed Mueller several times. And I said, I think he's a man of integrity, and that he turned around the FBI to make it more prevention-oriented. Trump seemed to appreciate that. It's interesting when Rod Rosenstein and the FBI director Chris Wray walked out of the meeting yesterday at the White House. Zeleny on CNN said they were laughing with each other. They seemed to be having a good time. That's, I think, what's really going on. I think Trump is going through some hoops and, as usual, causing a lot of stir. But in the end, I think he's going to find that the FBI acted properly.
Well, but you concede the point. You suggested, right, that Comey and McCabe, some of the senior people at FBI, disgraced themselves in the agency.
Yes, definitely. Comey by leaking material,
right,
which included classified information, and McCabe by lying to investigators. No question about that. And certainly Peter Strzok acted unprofessionally with his stupid messages to his girlfriend. So there's definitely issues there, no question.
So they disgraced themselves in the FBI. There's another Inspector General's report, the AP reported yesterday, that's coming out next month, that's going to criticize Comey and McCabe, at minimum, their handling of the Hillary email investigation, so just more substance to that assertion. But yet these same people were supposed to innocently construe as it pertains to using a former CIA spy to make overtures to Trump campaign operatives.
Yeah, just because they engaged in some abuse or wrongdoing doesn't mean that everything they did was improper. Those investigations were conducted by teams of FBI agents with a lot of supervision by FBI lawyers and others at different levels. And I don't think that we can start concluding that the FBI is a total wreck, just because of these individuals.
But do you agree with President Trump yesterday, his call over the weekend that was consummated yesterday for DOJ IG Horowitz to do an investigation of the investigators on this matter?
Sure. Especially given how controversial this has been and in my opinion, how much misinformation there's been, it's great to do that. I think very wise. And after all, the people in charge are Trump appointees, whether it's Sessions or Coates, the national intelligence director, and Rosenstein is a Trump appointee. People get mixed up about who's on which side, and they call for special counsels when in fact these individuals who are in charge are Trump appointees.
Do you just thinking about what Mark Penn said? Mark Penn, former Hillary Clinton pollster, who has said the Mueller investigation basically needs to come to an end. Now, he's sort of an opponent of these special prosecutors altogether, as are many, including Andy McCarthy on the right. But a point he made over the weekend into yesterday is the less the investigators, talking about Mueller and his team, the less they find, the more they investigate. Do you see the criticism that he's making, and do you believe that it is time for Mueller to move this to conclusion in some material way, as apparently he's telegraphed to Rudy Giuliani he's going to?
I think that is based on some historic precedent, and that's true that some of the special counsels or prosecutors in the past have gone on pointlessly. But Mueller is a different kettle of fish. He's a very direct, honest guy. If you look at his record at the FBI, there were no abuses found at any point. And I think he wants to wrap this up as quickly as possible. And I think that's what he's doing. It's understandable that people would wonder about this. It's all secret. But what he's doing is crossing the T's and dotting the I's, making sure that anybody who did engage in illegal conduct, namely those who lied to the FBI, are prosecuted. But when it comes to, the question of collusion, in my book, The Trump White House, I quote an August 14th Washington Post story from last year, which everyone has ignored, which cited emails turned over by the White House to the congressional committees in which the campaign, including Manafort, respond to overtures by Papadopoulos to go meet with Russian leaders. And what do they say? No, we're not going to do that. Manafort said, we have to make sure that nobody responds to any of these requests, and we have to make sure that Trump never goes to Russia. And other aides in the email chain said the same thing. So what more do you need to know about Russian collusion than that?
Okay, it's a fair point. He is Ronald Kessler, New York Times bestselling author on books on the Secret Service, FBI, CIA. His latest, The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game, with an exclusive sit-down, long-form interview with President Trump. Ronald Kessler, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.